The rejected pilot Marcus Chen had always been small for his age, but his dreams were bigger than most people twice his size. Standing at barely 5 feet 2 inches, he possessed something that couldn't be measured in centimeters or inches. His reflexes were lightning fast, his spatial awareness was exceptional, and his understanding of flight dynamics surpassed even veteran pilots. At 24, Marcus had spent 6 years preparing for this moment, studying every manual, practicing every simulation, and pushing his body to its absolute limits. The Galactic Defense Fleet Recruitment Center on Europa Station buzzed with activity as hundreds of candidates from dozens of species lined up for their final evaluations. Marcus watched as towering Xanthari warriors, their blue-scaled bodies rippling with muscle, moved through the physical assessments with ease, sleek. Fortanian pilots, their forearms giving them natural advantages in multi-control environments, glided through the coordination tests. Even the human candidates around him seemed to tower over his compact frame. Next candidate stepped forward, called the evaluation officer, a stern-faced woman with the insignia of a fleet commander. Marcus approached the measurement station, his heart pounding against his ribs. The holographic scanner hummed to life, projecting green lines across his body as it recorded every detail of his physical dimensions. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Other candidates glanced in his direction, some with sympathy, others with barely concealed amusement. Marcus kept his eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to show any sign of weakness or doubt. He had trained for this moment his entire adult life, and he wouldn't let anyone see him break. Height, 157.5 centimeters, the scanner announced in its mechanical voice. Minimum requirement for fighter pilot classification, 172 centimeters. Candidate does not meet physical standards. Commander Torres looked up from her datapad, her expression softening slightly. Mr. Chen, your test scores are remarkable. 98% in tactical analysis, perfect marks in spatial reasoning, and your simulation runs are in the top 1% of all candidates. However, regulations are clear. Fighter cockpits are designed for standardized physical requirements across all allied species. I'm sorry, Marcus felt the familiar sting of rejection, but he had prepared for this moment. Commander, I understand the regulations, but I believe my skills compensate for my height. I've modified practice cockpits to accommodate my size, and my performance actually improved. The regulations exist for safety reasons, Mr. Chen. In combat situations, reach and leverage can mean the difference between life and death. I cannot make exceptions, regardless of talent. She paused, consulting her notes. However, your technical scores are extraordinary. We have an opening in ground support operations. You would be working directly with flight crews, maintaining and preparing aircraft for combat missions. It wasn't what Marcus had dreamed of, but it was a door into the fleet. He nodded acceptance, swallowing his disappointment. I'll take it, Commander. Within a week, Marcus found himself assigned to Hangar Bay 7 on the massive fleet carrier UGS Horizon. The ship housed over 3,000 personnel from 16 different species, all working together to defend the outer colonies from the growing threat of the Void Hunters, a mysterious enemy that had been attacking settlements along the galactic rim. The hangar bay was a cathedral of metal and machinery, its ceiling stretching 5 stories high to accommodate the largest transport. Vessels, fighter craft lined the deck like sleeping predators, their sleek hulls gleaming under the harsh industrial lighting. Marcus reported to Chief Petty Officer Yiska, a weathered human woman who had been maintaining fleet aircraft for over 20 years. "So you're the pilot wannabe," Yiska said, looking Marcus up and down. "Torres sent me your file. Says you know more about flight systems than most of our active pilots." "I've studied everything I could get my hands on, Chief." "Studying and doing are different things, Chen. Let's see what you can do with a real bird." She led him to a damaged interceptor, its port engine housing scorched from recent combat. "This beauty took a plasma hit 3 days ago. The pilot barely made it back. Can you tell me what's wrong with it?" Marcus circled the aircraft, his trained eye picking out details that most people would miss. The damage was obvious, but there were subtler signs that spoke to deeper problems. The plasma hit damaged the primary engine housing, but that's not the real issue. The impact created a resonance cascade through the hull. The starboard engine is throwing micro-vibrations that will cause metal fatigue within 50 flight hours, if not corrected. Yiska raised an eyebrow. The diagnostic computer missed that. "How did you catch it?" "I can feel it," Marcus said, placing his hand on the hull. "The vibration pattern is wrong. It's like a musical instrument that's slightly out of tune. Most people hear the main notes, but if you listen carefully, you can hear the discord underneath." Over the following weeks, Marcus threw himself into his work with the same intensity he had once reserved for pilot training. He arrived early, stayed late, and volunteered for every difficult assignment. His fellow technicians, a mix of humans and aliens, initially treated him with the casual dismissal reserved for newcomers. But as Marcus proved his worth, identifying problems that others missed, and solving complex technical challenges, he began to earn their respect. His closest colleague was Sergeant Kretak, a Zenthari, whose warrior culture valued skill and dedication above all else. Despite their species' intimidating reputation, Kretak had chosen the technical path over combat, finding satisfaction in the precision required for aircraft maintenance. "You fight with tools instead of weapons," Kretak observed one day as Marcus recalibrated a targeting system. "But you fight with same spirit as warrior. Why you not become pilot?" Marcus looked up from his work, wiping grease from his hands. "Too short. Regulations say I don't meet physical requirements." Kretak's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was the Zenthari equivalent of laughter. Zenthari have saying, "Size of warrior not measured in height, but in size of heart and sharpness of mind. Perhaps your regulations measure wrong things." The conversation was interrupted by alarms echoing throughout the hangar bay. Red lights bathed the space in an ominous glow as pilots scrambled to their fighters. Marcus watched as Commander Sarah Mitchell, the squadron leader, ran past him toward her interceptor. "What's the situation?" Marcus called out. "Void Hunter probe detected in Sector 7, Mitchell shouted back. "We're scrambling a patrol to investigate." As the pilots prepared for launch, Marcus noticed something wrong with Mitchell's aircraft. The pre-flight diagnostic showed green across the board, but something in the engine's harmonics didn't sound right. He grabbed his scanner and ran toward the fighter just as Mitchell was climbing into the cockpit. "Commander, wait," Marcus called out. "There's something wrong with your engine." Mitchell paused, her helmet halfway on. "The diagnostics are clear, Chen. I don't have time for this. Please, just give me 30 seconds. Marcus was already running his scanner across the engine housing. The readings confirmed his suspicions. "Your fuel injection system is running at 97% efficiency. It passed the diagnostic because it's within acceptable parameters, but if you push the engine hard, it's going to fail." Mitchell hesitated. In combat situations, pilots often pushed their engines beyond normal limits. A 3% efficiency loss could mean the difference between making it home and dying in the void. How long to fix it? 2 minutes, maybe 3. Do it. Marcus's hands moved with practiced precision, adjusting fuel flow regulators and recalibrating injection timing. Around him, other fighters were launching, their engines creating a thunderous roar that shook the hangar deck. With seconds to spare, Marcus slammed the engine cowling shut and gave Mitchell a thumbs up. "Thanks, Chen," Mitchell said, her voice carrying both gratitude and newfound respect. "I owe you one." As her fighter disappeared into the star-filled void, Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions. He had helped save a pilot's life, but he was still stuck on the ground, watching others live his dream. Chief Yiska approached him, having witnessed the entire exchange. "Good catch, Chen. Mitchell's right to thank you. That fuel system would have failed the moment she hit afterburners. Just doing my job, Chief. No, that was something more. You've got instincts that can't be taught. The fleet needs people like you, even if they don't always recognize it." That night, Marcus lay in his small quarters, staring at the metal ceiling and listening to the gentle hum of the ship's engines. Through his porthole, he could see the patrol fighters returning from their mission, their navigation lights blinking like distant stars. He had saved a pilot today, proven his worth in a small but significant way. But as he watched the fighters dock and their pilots climb out, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant for something more than a life spent on the ground in the darkness of his room. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He would continue to serve, continue to prove his worth, but he would also continue to prepare. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, danger was building, and when it came, he would be ready to answer the call, regardless of regulations or height requirements. The small technician closed his eyes and dreamed of flying among the stars, not knowing that his greatest test was approaching faster than anyone could have imagined. Asterisk, the last stand, 3 months after Marcus had saved Commander Mitchell's life. The UG's horizon received an emergency distress signal from the mining colony of Kepler-4 for 2B. The message was fragmented, filled with static and panic, but the essential facts were clear. The Void Hunters had launched a massive assault on the Outer Rim settlements, and Kepler-4 for 2B was requesting immediate evacuation assistance. Marcus was in the middle of routine maintenance on a squadron of interceptors when the general alarm sounded. This wasn't the measured alert of a patrol scramble. This was the urgent, piercing wail that meant all-hands emergency. Throughout the hangar bay, pilots raced to their fighters, while ground crews worked frantically to prepare aircraft for immediate launch. "Chen," Chief Yiska's voice cut through the chaos. "We need every bird in the air in 15 minutes. Skip the full diagnostics and focus on essential systems only." Marcus nodded, his hands already moving across control panels with practiced efficiency. Around him, his fellow technicians worked with the same urgent precision, their movements choreographed by months of training and experience. Kretak appeared at his shoulder, the Zenthari's normally calm demeanor replaced by focused intensity. "Void Hunters attack in numbers never seen before," Kretak reported, his translator rendering his rapid speech into clipped English. "Intelligence suggests they have new weapons, new tactics. This not like previous raids." Within minutes, the first wave of fighters was screaming out of the hangar bay, their engines creating a thunderous roar that shook the entire ship. Marcus watched as squadron after squadron launched into the star-filled void, their navigation lights disappearing into the darkness like fireflies vanishing into a storm. The battle reports came in sporadically over the next several hours. The Void Hunters had indeed brought new weapons to bear, energy weapons that could slice through standard fleet armor like paper. Worse, their tactics had evolved beyond hit and run. Raids. They were using coordinated attacks, sophisticated electronic warfare, and what appeared to be captured coalition technology. "We're losing birds faster than we can replace them," Yiska said grimly, monitoring the tactical display. "Half our fighters are damaged or destroyed, and the pilots who are coming back are reporting that the enemy is adapting to our tactics." In real time, Marcus felt helpless, watching the battle unfold from the safety of the hangar bay while brave pilots died in the void. He had continued his secret training over the past months, spending his off-duty hours in the simulation pods and practicing with various weapon systems. But training was different from the reality of combat, and he had never been tested under real pressure. The first wave of returning fighters brought sobering news. The Void Hunters weren't just raiding Kepler-4 for to be, they were systematically destroying every defensive position, every ship, every structure that could be used to mount a resistance. This wasn't a raid for resources or territory. This was extermination. "We need volunteers for a rescue mission," Commander Mitchell announced as she climbed out of her damaged fighter. Her helmet was cracked, and her flight suit was stained with coolant fluid from a ruptured life support line. "There are still civilian transports trying to evacuate from the surface, but they're sitting ducks without fighter escort." Marcus watched as pilot after pilot volunteered for what was clearly a suicide mission. The casualty reports were devastating. Of the 60 fighters that had launched from the horizon, only 18 remained operational. The pilots who were left were exhausted, their nerves frayed by hours of continuous combat against an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. The second wave of volunteers never made it to the launch bay. A massive explosion rocked the ship, sending Marcus tumbling across the hangar deck. Emergency lighting flickered on as the main power systems failed, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Through the chaos, he could hear damage reports echoing through the ship's communication system. "Direct hit to the port fighter bay," a voice reported. "Structural damage to decks 7 through 12. We've lost primary launch capability." Marcus picked himself up, his ears ringing from the explosion. Around him, other crew members were doing the same, checking for injuries and trying to assess the damage. The hangar bay was a disaster zone, with debris scattered across the deck and several fighters damaged beyond repair. "How many operational fighters do we have left?" Mitchell asked, her voice tight with strain. Chief Yiska consulted her damage. Assessment tablet. 3 interceptors, 2 heavy fighters, and 1 reconnaissance bird. That's it. Marcus felt his heart sink. 6 fighters against an enemy fleet that had already destroyed most of the coalition's defensive forces. It was hopeless, but he could see in the faces around him that no one was ready to give up. These were people who had dedicated their lives to protecting others, and they would continue fighting until their last breath. "We need someone to take the reconnaissance bird and locate the civilian transports," Mitchell said. "It's a single-seat fighter, modified for long-range scanning. The pilot will be alone out there, with minimal weapons and no backup." The silence that followed was deafening. Every pilot in the hangar bay knew it was a death sentence. The reconnaissance bird was fast and well-equipped with sensors, but it couldn't stand up to the kind of firepower the Void Hunters were bringing to bear. "I'll take it," Marcus said quietly. Every head in the hangar bay turned toward him. "Chief." Yiska shook her head immediately. "Chen, You're not certified for combat operations. Regulations clearly state. Regulations also say I'm too short to fly, Marcus interrupted. But I know that bird better than anyone. I've maintained it, modified it, and run diagnostics on every system. I can fly it. Commander Mitchell studied him for a long moment. Have you ever been in combat, Chen? No, ma'am. But I've been preparing for this moment my entire life. I know I can do this. The reconnaissance bird doesn't have the physical modifications you'd need for standard fighters. The cockpit is smaller, the controls are closer together. It might actually be better suited for someone of your size. Marcus felt a surge of hope. Give me a chance, Commander. Let me prove that size doesn't matter when it comes to courage. Mitchell looked around the hangar bay at the exhausted pilots, the damaged aircraft, and the grim faces of her crew. They were out of options, and everyone knew it. Get him suited up, she said finally, and God help us all. Within minutes, Marcus was strapping himself into the cockpit of the reconnaissance fighter. The controls felt natural under his hands, familiar from countless hours of maintenance and study. The seat fit him perfectly, and his smaller stature actually gave him better visibility through the canopy than a larger pilot would have had. Remember, your job is to locate the civilian transports and guide them to safety, Mitchell's voice came through his helmet communicator. You're not equipped for direct combat with Void Hunter fighters. If you encounter enemy forces, your orders are to run. Understood, Commander. As the hangar bay doors opened and the star-filled void beckoned, Marcus felt a calm settle over him. This was the moment he had trained for, dreamed of, and prepared for his entire life. He was finally going to fly among the stars, not as a passenger or observer, but as a pilot with a mission that could save lives. The reconnaissance fighter shot out of the hangar bay like a bullet, its engines pushing Marcus back into his seat with acceleration that made his blood sing. For the first time in his life, he was truly flying, surrounded by the infinite expanse of space and the distant glow of nebulae. The tactical display showed the location of the last known civilian transports, but it also revealed something else. A massive Void Hunter battleship was moving to intercept them, its weapon systems charging for what would be a devastating attack. The civilians had no chance of escaping on their own. Marcus made a decision that would define the rest of his life. Instead of simply locating the transports and calling for help, he positioned his small fighter between the battleship and the fleeing civilians. His reconnaissance bird was equipped with a single high-powered laser cannon, designed more for disabling disabled spacecraft than for serious combat. This is Reconnaissance 7 to all civilian transports. Marcus broadcast on the emergency frequency. I'm going to try to buy you time to escape. Keep your engines at maximum burn and don't look back. The Void Hunter battleship was 10 times the size of his fighter, bristling with weapons that could vaporize his ship in seconds. But Marcus had studied their tactics, analyzed their weaknesses, and prepared for this moment. He knew that the key to survival wasn't strength or size, but intelligence and precise action. As the battleship opened fire, Marcus threw his fighter into a series of evasive maneuvers that would have been impossible for a larger pilot in a standard cockpit. His small size allowed him to tolerate higher G-forces, and his intimate knowledge of the ship's systems let him push the engines beyond their normal limits. Asterisk. The laser cannon on his reconnaissance bird wasn't designed for ship-to-ship combat, but Marcus had modified it during his months of maintenance work. A few precise shots to the battleship's sensor arrays temporarily blinded it, giving the civilian transports precious seconds to escape. But the victory was short-lived. More Void Hunter fighters were converging on his position, and his small ship couldn't evade them all. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, Marcus heard a familiar voice over the communication channel. "This is Commander Mitchell. Chen, you magnificent fool, you've given us the opening we needed. All fighters converge on Reconnaissance 7's position. Let's finish this." The remaining coalition fighters, led by Mitchell herself, swept down on the Void Hunter formation like avenging angels. In the battle that followed, Marcus proved that courage and skill were more important than physical size. His precise shooting and fearless flying helped turn the tide, and together, the small group of coalition fighters managed to drive off the enemy force. As the last Void Hunter ship disappeared into hyperspace, Marcus found himself surrounded by the voices of grateful civilians, thankful pilots, and amazed colleagues. He had done more than save lives. He had proven that heroism comes in all sizes, and that sometimes the smallest person can cast the longest shadow. When the reconnaissance fighter finally touched down in the hangar bay, Marcus was greeted by Chief Yiska, Kretak, and the entire maintenance crew. But more importantly, he was greeted by Commander Mitchell, who had a new insignia in her hands. "Congratulations, Pilot Chen," she said, pinning the wings to his chest. "The fleet is changing. Its regulations, from now on, will be measuring pilots by their courage and skill, not their height." Marcus looked around at the faces of his friends and colleagues, then up at the stars visible through the hangar bay opening. He had finally achieved his dream, but more importantly, he had proven that anyone can rise to greatness when the moment demands it. The small technician had become a pilot, and in doing so, had shown the galaxy that heroes come in all sizes. Asterisk.